Hello, everyone, and welcome to Heads Up, the weekly podcast of the National Headache Foundation. This is Dr. Lindsay Weitzel, migraine strategist, founder of the Facebook group Migraine Nation, and chronic daily migraine survivor. I am here this week with Dr. Tim Smith. Dr. Smith is the president and CEO of Study Metrics Research. He is also the first vice president of the National Headache Foundation. Hello, Dr. Smith. How are you this morning?
Hey, I'm doing great. It's a great day.
I'm really happy to have you on. We're super excited.
You.
So we have Dr. Smith on today because we want to talk about Lasmiditan. Lasmiditan recently received approval from the FDA for use in the acute treatment of migraine. And we just want to be able to talk about it and maybe answer any questions you guys might have in the comments. So, Dr. Smith, let's start by discussing who Lasmiditan is meant for.
Sure, Lindsay. So Lasmiditan, as you mentioned, is an acute treatment for the treatment of a migraine that is either underway or beginning to disable a patient. And basically, the patients who would be good for this would be anyone who can't get relief from simpler agents like non-steroidal anti-inflammatory medicines or simple analgesics. Patients can't get relief from that, and these are the ones that usually have to go to physicians for diagnosis and treatment that need something more effective. Then this would be a treatment that would work for them.
Okay. So Lasmiditan is unique in its mechanism of action. Can you explain why it's unique?
Sure. So Lasmiditan, Rayvow, as the brand name is going to be,
right.
It works on a specific serotonin receptor. I don't want to get too complicated on this, but most patients are familiar with the triptan drugs, and they work on serotonin receptors to relieve migraine attacks. But there are 18 different serotonin subtypes, and the triptans work on one subtype, and the Lasmiditan works on a different subtype. And the main difference between those subtypes is that the Lasmiditan receptor does not cause blood vessel constriction, so it doesn't have some of the same precautions or warnings that are part of the triptan class.
Okay, so my next question was going to be how is this medicine different from the triptans that we are all used to? Is there any other way other than the receptor types that they act on? Anything else we should know about the difference?
There are some subtle other differences, the main one being the receptor subtype and the blood vessel constriction, but also the Lasmiditan is more brain penetrant. It gets into the brain tissue. The triptans work peripherally in the bloodstream to peripheral receptors that are not in the central nervous system, in the brain itself, and the Lasmiditan crosses the blood-brain barrier, gets into the brain tissue where the 5-HT1F receptor is, and exerts its effect there. The net result is we think that patients who don't respond well to triptans, or if they have reasons they shouldn't take triptans, like heart disease or previous stroke or things like that, or patients who just didn't tolerate triptans, couldn't tolerate the chest tightness or the neck or throat tightness or the flushed feelings that you get from some patients get from triptans. Those patients would be prime candidates to use Lasmiditan.
Okay, so that you just sort of touched on my next question, which was if I'm a patient who cannot take triptans, you mentioned for medical reasons, but maybe I'm someone who got rebounds headaches from them, or who they stopped working for me, or they never worked for me. Am I a good candidate to take Rayvow?
Well, there are a lot of patients out there like that, and we think that probably 50-60% of patients who try triptans actually have a good response and tolerate it well, and are willing to use it again and again. But that leaves a lot of people who just are not good candidates for triptans. And you mentioned the medication overuse headache. The jury's still kind of out on whether medication overuse headache is going to be a problem with Lasmiditan. Theoretically, it could be a problem, but I think we need a lot more clinical use before that can be, we can really make intelligent comments on that. I think in the meantime, we just have to presume that it could potentially be a problem. So it may not be a panacea for that.
Okay. So I believe there's been 3 main clinical trials on Rayvow. Can you tell us what the main clinical endpoints that were achieved were in these trials?
Sure. There were 3 studies. There were 2 placebo-controlled single attack trials, and then there was a long-term, open label study that where we got most of the safety data for those. And that's basically you have to do to market a medication for any indication, really, unless it's an orphan disease or something like that.
Mm.
They studied about 4,000 patients, and they treated about 20,000 attacks over the course of those 3 studies cumulatively. The primary endpoints on the efficacy studies were the 2-hour pain-free endpoint and the 2-hour freedom from most bothersome symptom, which for most people is either light sensitivity or nausea. When they say most bothersome symptom, they mean the most bothersome non-pain symptom out of the migraine list of criteria. And the medication was successful on all of those endpoints.
Okay.
And safety endpoints were met as well.
Okay. What were the main side effects that were found?
So the side effects there are some side effects. About 20% or just under 20% of people reported symptoms like dizziness or drowsiness, maybe some feelings of tingling or things like that.
Okay.
Of them were the usual, suspects of side effects, but that you get from almost all clinical trials. But that was a little unique for Lasmiditan to have caused the incidence of dizziness and drowsiness that it did cause.
Okay. And then I do know that it was approved by the FDA, but it's not quite available to us yet because drugs with CNS activity, meaning central nervous system activity, have to undergo some additional review. And so can you tell us what's being evaluated and how long it will be before this will be available to us to try?
Sure. Yeah, so the FDA has cleared it for marketing, but now the DEA has to review, and that's about a 90-day period. I think we're about halfway through that as we're speaking. So probably, by first of the year or shortly thereafter, I think the DEA will finish their review and make a determination on not whether it should be marketed. We know the FDA has already approved that, but the DEA will determine whether it's going to be marketed as a controlled substance or not. And the issues are, if some patients have a dizzy or drowsy, or if they have a giddy feeling from taking it, and some medicines that are central nervous system active can cause some of those side effects. And then the question is whether they have any misuse of potential or the like. And the DEA has to determine that. And there are studies done to look at those issues, and the DEA is reviewing that data now. What they're going to say about it is anybody's guess. Most industry experts think it'll probably be at least a low-level controlled substance when it gets on the market, but we really don't know. So we'll just have to wait and see what that looks like in January.
Okay. All right. Well, is there anything else you would like to add to our discussion or like to share about Lasmiditan?
Well, I suppose I should have mentioned when we were talking about side effects that because of the drowsiness thing, patients shouldn't drive after having taken it, and that's going to be part of the labeling when it comes out.
Right.
I think for a patient who has a horrible migraine, if they get relief, I think a little dizziness or a mild, giddy or drowsy feeling might be a trade-off that they're willing to accept.
Right.
If they can't get relief from anything else, or if they've got reasons why they can't take other medications, that will be very important. So, it's been probably 25 years since the triptan started coming on the market in the early 90s. We haven't had any new abortive treatments to take to turn off a migraine since that time. So we're just coming into a time where we're starting to see approvals of new medicines, and thankfully so. There's still a great unmet need because patients can't always tolerate triptans, or there may be reasons why they can't take them. And if anti-inflammatories and analgesics don't work, then you're just kind of left stuck. Just migraine run its course, and we know how horrible that is. Those of us that have migraine, we've all done it, and it's a miserable way to live your life. So we certainly embrace and welcome new additions to the marketplace, new weapons in our toolkit.
Yep.
Always use more options. So it's a good thing. It's a good day for migraine sufferers, I think.
Yes, we are all always very excited when something new is coming out. So I hope you all enjoyed this episode on Lasmiditan. We haven't generally done this before, but if you do have questions, go ahead and put them in the comments, and we will try to get answers from Dr. Smith to answer your questions. So feel free to put questions in the comments, and we would love to hear what you have to say. So thanks for joining us today, and join us again next week on Heads Up, the weekly podcast of the National Headache Foundation. Bye-bye.